Hello and welcome to this India Today and Business Today special. I'm Akshita Nandagopal. In 2015, world leaders agreed to 17 global goals for sustainable development to achieve a better world by 2030. But who's really checking if countries are actually doing that? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is via the annual Goalkeepers Report, and for 2024, the focus is on malnutrition. It's my pleasure to now introduce Mark Suzman, the CEO of the Gates Foundation. Mark, good morning. Pleasure to have you with us here on India Today.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, congratulations to the Gates Foundation for successfully publishing another edition of the Goalkeepers Report. Can you just tell us first, to kick off this conversation, the importance of such a report and why it's also important for us to keep this report card, if you will, on the progress made every year, Mark?
Absolutely. Well, we set up the report after the world approved the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, which were a set of ambitious goals around health and development and climate mitigation with a target of 2030. And we wanted to make sure we were highlighting progress because at that stage, there was huge global progress. In fact, the first 20 years of the 21st century, taken as a whole, saw more improvements in preventable child mortality, reductions in infectious diseases, poverty reduction than any other period in human history. But unfortunately, as the report also now shows, since COVID in 2020, for much of the world, that progress has now stalled. India is a positive outlier where there is still some significant progress going on, but at a global level, we are now significantly off track to meet those 2030 goals. And this year, we are highlighting a particular challenge, the challenge of malnutrition, to try and highlight both the scope of the problem, but also the possibility of reversing that.
Why did you find it pertinent this year to focus on malnutrition? You know, the photos that we used to see of starving children or famines, unfortunately, even in the 21st century, it's still a reality in some countries. And what I also find interesting is that the report doesn't just focus on what the status is, but it also provides solutions. But why did you feel that this time we must talk about and address the issue of malnutrition?
Yes, so two reasons. One is that it's a truly hidden problem. That, as you say, people are aware of it loosely, but are not of the magnitude or of the social and economic impact. As the report shows, we actually have 140 million children worldwide suffer from stunting and wasting. That means they don't get enough food or nutrients to actually grow sufficiently. Once you have suffered from stunting or wasting in your first 2 years of life, your body will never fully grow, your brain will never fully grow to its full potential. That's an enormous human cost. We show that it costs between 3 to 16% of GDP across multiple countries. And we have a study that shows it's going to get worse because of climate change. We risk having an additional 40 million children stunted or wasted because of the impact on agricultural productivity. And so we wanted to highlight that, but also, as you say, show that there are some very cost-effective, scalable solutions that can be rolled out right now, from fortification of basic foods, from maternal micronutrient supplements, to increased support in agricultural areas like dairy, that could be transformative in turning that around and making sure instead of an increase in malnutrition, we actually see significant decreases in the years ahead.
You know, there's also a challenge, and I'm curious about this. In publishing a global report like this, Mark, every country has, in fact, very different challenges. The nature of challenges are very different. The solutions are also very different. So how do you really draft this kind of a global report? For example, on the issue of malnutrition, how do you kind of address it country-wise?
Well, you're right that you have to do both. So it is a global problem. So we want to actually highlight it as a global issue, particularly because one of the big challenges that has led to some of the setbacks in recent years has been a big drop or stagnation in international aid, traditional aid that has gone into the health sector, for example, global vaccination. Gavi, the Global Vaccine Alliance, which has provided a lot of support to India, among other countries, over the last 25 years, has worked very hard and is coming up with a replenishment, but it's not clear if we're going to have it fully funded. And the world has not had vaccination rates as a total come back yet to its 2019 levels because of the setbacks from COVID. So you are highlighting a global problem in the nutrition case because the stunting and wasting happens across large parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America, many parts of the world. It is worse and more extreme in some areas, and you do need to think carefully about how to target the interventions. So, for example, India has been looking at the recommendations that we talk about on maternal micronutrient supplements, where the World Health Organization has some new guidelines, and the ICMR just this year has developed a new study that's trying to customize and look at what is going to be the most important combination for the situation in India, based on biomarkers, based on data of what the nutritional deficits are among pregnant women and young children in India. And so that's kind of what we want. We want to have countries following India's model, where you look at the global issue, you look at global best practices, and then you look at your own situation and find what is the best way to adapt it to local conditions.
That's great to hear. But since you're talking about India and you're talking about how India is actually doing in this fight of the child health crisis, what would you really deem as the Indian model in this fight that you're saying other countries should emulate?
Well, one thing India has done that really we wish many other countries would follow is it has for a long time prioritized nutrition. The Mission Poshan 2.0 that the Prime Minister has championed is a dedicated, well-funded program. The Anganwadi workers across the country are focused exactly on this and the target populations we're talking about. And so the first thing to do is to provide prioritization, political prioritization and funding. But then even then, although India has seen some significant improvements over the last decade, there's still a very significant challenge. That many women and children still don't get access to the full nutrients they need. And that's where we want to then focus on how do we adapt these new interventions? How do we look for more nutritious foods and promote dietary diversity? And that includes having to focus on agricultural productivity. And we actually highlight an intervention, including a case study from India in the report about the development of dairy, because you can actually make more productive dairy cows. And we cite a study showing that simple access to milk has a hugely beneficial health impact for children who are able to have regular access to milk. And so that's exactly the combination we're looking for. And I think India, both through the funding and the political prioritization, is a global leader in the fight right now.
We've seen several initiatives on this front, and largely if you look at how the Prime Minister has chosen to address issues of nutrition, it's always been about being vocal for local. It's a very popular initiative here in India, and of late particularly focused on millets and how nutritious millets can be. Do you think those kind of schemes that kind of hit closer to home, focus on local products and promoting those actually help?
Yes, absolutely. So the focus on millets is a good example, because that is an example of a local grain that does contribute to dietary diversity. And you want to think about the combination of how do millets fit into a broad dietary pattern, how does rice, how does the fortification of rice, and we've worked currently with the government for many years into providing fortification of essential vitamins and iron into rice, because that's the biggest part of the staple diet. Can you have broader access to pulses and vegetables and horticulture, to dairy, as I cited, and poultry? All of that dietary diversity is very important, and really the bulk of it has to be done locally, because the most affected communities are the smallholder farmers and their families in rural areas. And so I think that focus on local is absolutely essential. But you also want to be looking at what global best practices are. And that's where that example of the maternal micronutrient supplements is so important, because that's based on work that has been done globally, that's endorsed by the World Health Organization. And then the Indian government takes a look at it, the ICMR works on it. And then what I hope we'll see is some new guidelines tailored to the Indian context that will actually have a higher impact than existing programs.
So, we've spoken of the positives. So just, as feedback really for the government on what needs to be done going forward, what do you think are the areas of concern that perhaps the Indian government, the Indian administration, to you, Mark, must focus on? And what has the Goalkeepers Report really found on that?
Yeah, it really is being focused on the implementation of these things. Implementation is difficult at scale, particularly when you're facing multiple other competing political priorities. And so one message of the report is this really is and should be the highest political priority, because you are investing in India's future. The investments made in producing healthy children now will actually pay off massively 2 decades from now when these children enter the workforce. And there's also very clear data, which the report cites, that when a child is malnourished and does suffer from stunting or wasting, the economic impact of that is profound, that they're likely to have up to 3 years less schooling, that when they do have education, they're less successful, they're less likely to get a job, they're more likely to end up in poverty. So investing in this nutrition now and prioritizing it above other interventions is a critical foundation. It's not just the right thing to do for these children, it is the best thing to do for the long-term health of the Indian economy.
So true. And I think in the report, it was also mentioned that a nation grows when the children do. And I couldn't agree with that more. Just on a side note, Mark, when I read this report, the first question that came to my mind is, why is this called Goalkeepers? Because for us, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is football.
Yes. Well, we thought about that, but it really is about building a community of change makers. And we actually have a number of Indian people we call goalkeepers, who I met with on my last trip. And we have communities in every country who we see as champions of the Sustainable Development Goals. The spirit of goalkeepers is, those were promises made by every government on the planet to their own citizens and to the world as a whole about the world we want to live in. And we want to keep promises. Promises keep, those are measurable goals, and the goalkeepers are there to both help energize and inspire, but also, as you say, measure and make sure the world is actually prioritizing and tracking progress and making sure we're investing in people, because that, for us as the Gates Foundation, our mission is that belief that every person deserves the chance to a healthy and productive life, and we believe these Sustainable Development Goals are the roadmap to get there.
Okay, that's an amazing message to end this conversation on. Thank you very much, Mark. Congratulations once again to you and the Gates Foundation for publishing the Goalkeepers Report of 2024. We look forward to having a conversation with you in 2025 as well. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.